But at that moment I could see my hair falling down my nose, almost touching my lips. Not only that, this thinly lit room, which had only a candle as the source of illumination, was also unknown to me. Was I kidnapped? This was the most basic assumption I could have made, since a strange place and having limbs restricted were the signs of what I have seen in numerous movies. But who would abduct an orphan? All this internal contemplation and monologue was to distract my mind from the excruciating pain I was feeling all over my body. I looked at my body and found I was half naked with the shape of ribs carved on my skin, indicating my malnutrition. It might have surprised me if I hadn't been so distracted by something else. Why there are so many marks? A chill ran down my spine as I witnessed the numerous marks of blackish-blue bruises all over my bare skin, like someone had a wild time whipping the life out of me. My body began shivering at the thought of what would happen if the person who had done this to me walked back into the room. I glanced at the only door present inside the room, but fortunately, there was no sound coming from the other side. Without waiting, I began to pull my binds as hard as I could, but it was my biggest mistake. Rumble. Aha! Bolts of lightning passed down from my toes to my scalp as even greater burning pain ran all over. It felt like my world was dyed white and bones screaming in pain. I flailed like a fish as the current continued passing each tissue of my body. My arms and legs vibrated heavily by the sensation, and before I could know, I fell unconscious. In the small storage room where the teenage boy could be seen currently with his head hung low and body lifeless, suddenly two new appearances walked in the gate. These two men were wearing red and black uniforms with high-waist black pants that reached their stomachs and red coats and black shirts over their shoulders. There was a formal military cap with the sign of an emblem, just like the one on their chest. The two men were having a casual chat amongst themselves in a different language than the one in which the boy was mumbling to him some moments ago. Did he try escaping once again even after knowing the consequences? Well, it's a shame that we didn't get to witness the fun scene. The blonde soldier spoke up with a sigh, like torturing a young child was nothing to feel pity about. The grin he wore while gazing at the fallen teenager was something one could only feel disgusted about. Then let's wake him and see where this goes. The other, brown-haired and dark-skinned, spoke with a malicious grin before he began unzipping his pants. Lower the bars for me. Hearing the fellow guard's call, the blonde soldier shook his head without even trying to hide his amusement before he pushed a lever beside the fainted boy and brought his body lower until it didn't reach the crotch level of the tanned soldier. The boy suddenly shot his eyes wide awake upon feeling the moist sensation over his face. The dormant electricity inside his body once again surfaced, and the small room once again heard the cries of agony arising from the boy. The prisoner didn't even notice how the soldier was pissing over his face with a sinister grin, since the pain coursing across his body was making it difficult for him to remain awake any longer. Just shut up already. Hearing the boy's scream made the blonde soldier annoyed as he kicked the prisoner's face with the heel of his shoe after his partner was done unloading his bowels. Cock. The boy spat in pain as he felt his nose being disfigured with that blow. And it didn't stop there, as the boy felt his limbs being pulled apart with the chains his body was bound with. The tanned soldier used the lever to bring the boy back in position before he balled his fist, kissed the knuckle, and slammed it hard into the prisoner's torso. Whack! The boy, who was struggling hard to maintain his consciousness, felt his ribs breaking with that blow, which was absurd in every way. But the misery restricted his rationality to thinking anything properly. Just shut up already. Hearing the boy's scream made the blonde soldier annoyed as he kicked the prisoner's face with the heel of his shoe after his partner was done unloading his bowels. Cock. The boy spat in pain as he felt his nose being disfigured with that blow. And it didn't stop there, as the boy felt his limbs being pulled apart with the chains his body was bound with. The tanned soldier used the lever to bring the boy back in position before he balled his fist, kissed the knuckle, and slammed it hard into the prisoner's torso. Whack! The boy, who was struggling hard to maintain his consciousness, felt his ribs breaking with that blow, which was absurd in every way. But the misery restricted his rationality to thinking anything properly. The beating didn't stop there, as the blonde soon began to slap and punch the boy in the face while spouting something that the boy was unable to understand. But from the tone of it, it seemed this soldier was extremely agitated about something. Stabbing knees in his torso, punching his, poking fingers into his eyes until the point where the boy was unable to see anything, and pulling his nose until it didn't bleed. Ah, it feels great to bash a pretty face. The blonde soldier sighed as he wiped his bloodied hand, which of course didn't belong to him, with a handkerchief. The tanned soldier soon also got done beating the boy, who was reduced down to an almost lifeless corpse who was hanging with a single slim thread of vitality by now. His face was all bruised up. Eyes blinded, ear sliced, nose pulled from inside out, and hair pulled out from places, making the boy, who had beautiful silver hair previously, nearly bald. His limbs were broken, ribs torn, and blood seeping from different corners of his body. If anything was keeping the boy alive was a hope that he would soon wake up and find this the worst nightmare of his life. However, he never woke up that night. Rather, a fairy appeared in this nightmarish time and saved the boy from his misery at last. What in the world they did with you? It has been 3 days since I found myself in this prison lock. My body and mind were broken, yet I haven't got a single clue about my whereabouts or how I ended up here in the first place. I was just a normal high school Japanese guy who had normal hobbies without any solid background worth getting abducted in greed for something valuable. Then why? My blurry eyes let out streams of tears once again, staining this transfigured face of mine, which has been swollen and bruised at every corner. I could no longer smell or see anything properly. My insides were bleeding, and I never assumed someone would be able to feel the rush of blood flowing downward like that. My head was hurting like I had been thrashed into a concrete pipe repeatedly. I did try asking the 2 men who were periodically beating me while shouting in an incomprehensible language, but nothing they said made any sense, so I was pretty much wrecked up. I don't even know how to bite my tongue and kill myself. I did try but failed miserably. The stinging sensation didn't allow me to move much either. For some reason, despite not having drank a single drop of water or eaten food even once, haven't made me go insane at all. But the pain was doing that job, to drive me into insanity. Am I really gonna die here? I didn't have many dreams in my life. Just wanted to graduate from a good college, get a job, and make a happy family. I have starved for love and affection, so I just wanted to have at least a lover in my life on whom I could dote upon and receive some love from her as well. Some said I was being overly dramatic for someone in high school, but that's how my life was. And now, everything was just a baseless yearning and unreasonable goals, since from what I could sense, I would not be able to overcome another round of beating from those 2 monsters. Resistance was futile. The hope to escape from this prison was nothing short of impossible. In short, there was nothing I could do other than let the next sleep tempt me into eternal slumber. I might have regrets just based on my wish to love someone, but I couldn't do anything about it. Clink. The eerie sound of the door cracking resonated and made my body tremble subconsciously. They were here. Haha. This fucker still lives. How fortunate. The blonde sarcastically spoke as he watched the teenage boy hanging on the chains like always, but the fresh streams of tears made it obvious that the prisoner was alive and ready to be bashed once again. Good. I wanted to vent somewhere. The tanned man grinned as the irritation he carried because of his yapping wife was finally going to be spent here. Should I go first, then? The tanned man asked, to which the blonde said, be my guest. The burly man clenched his fist and reeled it back, aiming for the already disoriented face of the kid before he launched the strike at a furious pace. But his punch never landed. What in the world is going on here? The angry voice of a lady resonated heavily in the room before the 2 guards turned to look at the entranceway. Their faces went pale and their eyes turned dark, witnessing the lady in person for the first time. It was the last syllable the blonde soldier was able to utter before he found his insides freezing and fingers being frostbitten. His limbs, intestine, heart, liver, and every part of his body soon froze into solid ice. Like a human sculpture was created in real time, the blonde man's existence ceased right there and then. Witnessing the horrifying scene and already aware of how powerless he was in front of the lady, the tanned man dropped to the ground with his head bashed on the surface. Have mercy, my lady. We were just interrogating the bastard who dared harm the young lady. These two soldiers were informed yesterday that the lady had woken up and provided a statement. And according to that statement, the boy should have been released the day before. However, these two were having so much fun beating the crap out of the boy that they reported a missing case of the prisoner and kept him locked up here to satiate their anger and frustration. But now that the lady herself has arrived at the scene. Bastard. Care to tell me whom you dared call a bastard? The tanned man felt his limbs trembling at the chilly tone of the lady and realized how he had screwed up his only chance. He knew there was no escape, so conjuring his best attack and fortifying his fist, he jumped on his feet to attack the young woman, only to realize she wasn't there at all. And the thing that awaited him was thick ice pincers that launched themselves at the tanned man with an unimaginable force. In mere seconds, the two soldiers who had tortured the prisoner, now proven innocent, were shredded from their post and executed without a single remorse crossing the eyes of their executor. The said young lady was currently standing in front of the broken boy who had lost consciousness at some point between the one-sided annihilation. My lady. You might get infected, the soldier, who had been waiting just outside the door of the cell room, called out to the young girl, only to find his voice choking in his throat when he received a death glare from the lady. The soldier bowed his head in apology before he called for others to clean up the mess. A single droplet of tear rolled down her cheek as she gazed at the young man laying in her lap as some words escaped her lips. Forgive me, Kyle. Ah. My head began to throb once again, but this time it wasn't as bad as before. Subconsciously, when I jerked my hand, I found there was no resistance whatsoever. I slowly pulled my legs as well and found the same results. Are you awake now? My eyes snapped open, and surprisingly, I was able to see clearly as well, but what made me most surprised was that in place of a narrow dark cell, I was facing a bed canopy for some reason with white curtains around. I clutched my head and slowly turned to look at the person who had presumably saved me from those two demons. I heard her voice before fainting last time as well, which provided the support to prove my hunch. However, the very moment my eyes landed on the lady, my mind went blank and I felt the throbbing sensation in my head elevating. Princess Alatia? Am I in a freaking game? The Fallen Angel was the name of the game I used to play a lot during my first year in high school. It was a new kind of RPG game with the element of romance and action added to it. At that time it gained incredible popularity amongst youngsters because of the defined character and how real the animation seemed. I had to change some specs of the PC to enjoy the game to the fullest, and spending my money never felt better than that time. I was an avid fan of the game who played it straight for half a year. Its main genre was romance and action, so the character interaction and the tension built up never allowed the audience to get fed up with the dialogues, and the action scenes were overpowered enough to keep virtual battle junkies engaged. The main character, Logan, was supposed to start his journey from the renowned academy of this empire, which was administered and partially controlled by the central authority itself. Of course, the main character had a tragic past and was buffed with extraordinary powers to crush any obstacle that comes in his way, which also proved to be a hurdle for his growth. His primary goal in joining the academy was to become stronger, gain a demon hunter license, and avenge his family who got slaughtered by a high-ranking demon general when Logan was 3 years old. The trauma helped him ignite the dormant powers and forced his awakening. When people generally awaken their skills and talent at the age of 7 to 8, Logan had already gotten a hang of his newfound powers by the age of 5 and slaughtered a group of low-ranking bandits by accident. Yes, by accident, since the protagonist has a skill that allows him to wield such strength that he himself couldn't control. Until he's fighting evil forces in the face of demons or humans, Logan is practically an indestructible and invincible force of nature. And considering what dangers this world was crowded with, such a protagonist was much needed to maintain the balance. Logan's goal to join the academy, other than becoming stronger, was to get a hold of his said powers as well. Thankfully, he met many people who supported him at every difficult step of his life. Many heroines come to love the protagonist for different reasons, and considering their distinctive nature and otherworldly beauty, many people only play this game to hear their adorable voice and enjoy romance with them through the protagonist's perspective. Amongst those heroines, there was one who fell for the main character after a long time in the story and was hailed as the Frost Princess by many back in my previous world. Princess Alatia Trywin Valanchide. one of the main female leads who had her separate arc and backstory, and the person whom I was currently facing. You seem to have recovered sooner than I expected. Her violet eyes never left the parchment over which she was writing something probably important, as Alatia spoke to me in a borderline indifferent tone. If only I hadn't regained the memories of this body, I might have considered her rescuing me just out of obligation. It's all thanks to my lady. I kept my head hung low as I spoke those words. My eyes roamed over the three-piece suit I currently was wearing, which was considered a typical butler's uniform in any day and age. Though I looked good in this attire, it doesn't change my post in this mansion. I, Kyle, an ex-noble and childhood friend of Alatia, was now her servant and was supposed to become a major antagonist in the future. Even though Alatia behaves indifferently with me or anyone else, she has a soft spot for everyone surrounding her. The reason why I was serving her despite being her friend emerges from the fact that my family was shredded down from the title of nobilities, and when my father decided to sell me off to a slave trader, Alatia appeared out of nowhere and bought me in exchange of 1,000 gold coins. Quite a hefty sum, truth be told. In return, I was now bound with her for the rest of my life, and after what she had done for me 3 days ago, I possibly couldn't have thought of betraying her or running away from the female lead as well. I was sincerely gratified by what she had done for me. Not only did she rescue me from those 2 monsters, but dropped them to their demise right at that instance. I received the intel from the Knight Commander, who was also present with Alatia at that time. Alatia tended to me for the whole 3 days, without allowing any single person to enter the room. The precious phoenix tears, which take millions of gold coins to buy, exhausted in my treatment, that kind of abuse my body and mind have suffered from. I couldn't possibly express how thankful I was to the lady I serve. I was planning to take someone else as my personal attendant to the academy, but now that you seem fine. Alatia turned to look at me, or to say, she was assessing me with those peculiar violet eyes she possesses. Those eyes weren't just there for decoration or a part of her sense organs. Her eyes hold the ability to inspect the emotions the people around her carry for Alatia. When she advances in the story, her eyes allow her to gaze at the weak points of her opponent and even pry through any kind of obstruction or barrier. But at the moment, she could only see how one feels about her. She must have already categorized by now that the feelings I harbor for the lady were only limited to admiration and gratefulness, which must have given her the shade of greenish blue. Alatia has categorized the hue every person gives off into the feelings they carry for her. Like black means hatred or desire to kill, red means anger, pink means love, and so on. Originally, Kyle was supposed to fall in love with Alatia after this massive event in his life, or so what I remember was the case. It has already been 2 years, so I might be misplacing some of the things, but this was a major turn point in Kyle's life which made him slowly obsessed with his lady. And in the end, Kyle's jealousy toward Logan cost him his life. However, now that I have taken over, that surely wouldn't going to happen. My lady, the carriage is prepared. My trance was broken, hearing the familiar voice of the head maid, who came to inform Alatia. Humming, she got up from her seat before I stepped aside, and kept my head bowed in respect. I heard her steps walking past me and decided to take a single peek at her, out of curiosity, nothing else. But when I turned my head, I found Alatia in looking at me over her shoulder as well. I was startled to see her narrowed gaze, before turning my eyes back to the ground. Strange. I might have imagined it, but for some reason, I heard Alatia muttering something under her breath. Regardless, she finally walked out before I sighed in relief. She's pretty observant. After walking out of her room, Alatia was still frowning, slightly usual for her behavior. She wasn't a person to bother thinking about needless topics like politics and such, but the matter in hand she was presented with made her entirely baffled. Does he no longer love me? But why? Her servant Kyle. His hue no longer contains the pink shade, and Alatia was feeling uneasy about it for some reason. The only princess of the Balanchide Empire, Altaria, was feeling a sense of trouble emerging from deep inside her heart. A girl, who has been treated like a glass doll since her birth and more so after her awakening, had nothing in her life that could bother her for long. She had been the perfect example of a dutiful daughter, a cherished sister to her siblings, and a relentless warrior in her own right. She never felt anything too extreme in her life, since her awakening provided her with the strength that far surpassed her peers, and any other source of stress was always negated by her family members. She was not just a princess as in name. Her parents and siblings did take care of her like she would melt if Alatia had to worry about something. That was the reason why when some days ago, she collapsed after drinking the tea prepared by her butler, her father didn't even think for a second before sending her childhood friend to prison. After all, Kal takes care of most of the things related to Alatia. After she woke up the next day, she confessed how an overdose of potions caught up to her suddenly. Since the potion dissolves immediately with a person's aura pores, the medic was also not able to discern what was wrong with her until Alatia confessed it herself. Upon learning of her butler Kyle's disappearance, Alatia felt a disquiet in her heart for the first time. She wanted to see him, but word had it that Kyle had managed to escape from his confinement. For a fleeting moment, Alatia believed the news. Even though Kyle had been her childhood friend, she had consistently treated him as nothing more than a servant, especially after he lost his noble standing. She believed that her constant reminders of Kyle's non-awakened status might have driven him to break free from his incarceration. But still, Alatia was troubled, so she went to take a look by herself using her special eyes and investigated it with the help of Captain Stephen without letting her father know about this. Ultimately, she discovered him held captive by two contemptible figures, whom Alatia promptly obliterated from existence. Back to present. Was it because I arrived late and he thinks I was allowing all that torture to incur on him? Alatia couldn't help but ask herself since, after that day, Kyle's feelings toward her shifted entirely. And when today, she gazed at him and found there was no pink in his hue. She knew something was wrong. Every person harbors a hue or an aura around their body, from which Alatia judges how they feel about her. Before this incident, Kyle used to carry a subtle red along with patches of pink around his body, which showed that despite always being angry at her, he harbored romantic feelings for her. She could understand that he must be angry, because after being brought down from the position of a count's son, Kyle was serving her as a mere servant. In his eyes, she was just hurting him even more than being disowned by his family. Although Alatia had a reason to behave in that way, she never tried justifying herself. But love? The subject always perplexed Alatia, especially coming from her childhood friend who was intimately familiar with her disposition and her views on matters of romance. But something changed recently. After this incident, Kyle's shade completely shifted. There was no red or pink, but the shade of pure respect around his body, which made her profoundly baffled. She could understand that he was thankful to her for saving his life and the angry patches disappeared because of that, but why there was no love in his aura? Is he now fed up with me? Or did he realize how hopeless it was to fall for someone of my status? While it seemed the most likely scenario, their conversation this morning left her uneasy. He had seemed so distant that Alatia couldn't help but feel that he no longer saw her as a friend, but merely as his mistress. I mean, it's good that he no longer has feelings for me. But he won't break our friendship, right? Unbeknownst to herself, Alatia had covered the inside of the carriage with the frost she was conjuring subconsciously while thinking about a single person who had stirred so many feelings inside of her. I do look quite handsome. Silver hair with green eyes was a good combination to have over a moderately slim but shredded body. Kyle was a fallen nobility, so it was understandable why his features were so delicate and charming, and now that I was that Kyle, I feel I have landed a jackpot. Only if I hadn't such a bad rat awaiting me. I am known to be a good-for-nothing butler of the renowned Frost Princess, but... My eyes settled on the box stored in my room, securely locked within the cabinet beside my bed. It boasted 3 layers of locks, and even the slightest misstep would incinerate its contents. Kyle, or to say, I was an unawakened failure, but in truth, after I failed to get any angelic powers, my previous self took it to heart and pursued dark magic. An ancient one at that, to make these straw dolls. None are aware that I hold the souls of 2 ancient heroes, and in addition, I possess 2 spare vessels capable of containing other souls. These vessels grant me the ability to harness the power of a soul, but only if I have personally ended that individual's life. In the story, it was never mentioned how Kyle got the souls of 2 ancient warriors stored in these creepy straw dolls, which made him so overpowered. But well, whom I am going to complain to when these straw dolls are going to become my greatest ally to survive in this world. Dak. I closed the box since I had no intention to try out those powers as of now. I need to get accustomed to this new body of mine and help myself recall all those martial arts moves and weapon techniques the old Kyle has learned over years. I was able to behave like a proper butler on instincts, but I couldn't continue like this in the long term. I need to sort out my memories and become one with this body. There are numerous things I need to do to ensure the safety of Alatia and prevent those things that only could prove hazardous to the plot afterward. Since the academy would begin in 8 months, I do have not much time remaining. Let's get down with some physical exercises first.